Hello everyone, and welcome to Education USA Week. This week, university representatives, alumni, and our team from Education USA Japan have but a single goal: to help you achieve your dream of studying in the United States. Throughout the week, we will be holding seminars to explain many important study abroad topics, including college selection, writing essays, recommendation letters, scholarships, and study abroad for professionals. Our Education USA advisors are available and eager to help you discover all the options to study in the United States. This is a time of historic strength for the U.S.-Japan partnership, which is supported by the close personal bonds between the American and Japanese people. By studying abroad, you are making a tremendous contribution to fortifying the strength of our relationship and ensuring it endures for generations to come. I hope you will make the most of Education USA Week and wish you the best as you take the first steps in your USA study abroad adventure. Thank you.
Everyone, thank you for joining us for the Education USA webinar, Common Application for Teachers and Counselors. I'd like to invite our presenters, Ms. Meredith Lombardi from the Common Application and Ms. Amanda Lee Gearhart from University of Richmond. Meredith and Amanda, please begin your presentation.
Thank you, Yukiko, and thank you all for joining us this morning. Amanda, you want to just say a quick hello as well? I know we'll do introductions in a second.
Or hello.
Great. I am going to go ahead and share my screen so you all can see it. Great. Oops. Okay. Everyone can see this okay? Okay. So again, thank you all so much for joining us early in the morning, your time. It's actually evening for Amanda and myself here on the East Coast of the States, but we're very happy to be with you today. A little bit about who we are. Do you want to go first, Amanda?
Sure, absolutely. So thank you again. Very excited to be here and to be presenting this content for all of you this morning. My name is Amanda Gearhart, and I'm a Senior Assistant Director of Admission at the University of Richmond in Richmond, Virginia. My background is a little bit unusual. I graduated from the University of Delaware with a Bachelor of Science in Entomology, but very quickly transitioned my career into admissions and have worked at both a mid-size Tier 1 research institution and now at the University of Richmond at a liberal arts and sciences university.
And I am Meredith Lombardi. I work at Common App, and I am on our Access and Equity team doing basically support for the counseling community. So everyone who's trying to help students with the application process and the college admission process. Prior to joining Common App almost 5 years ago, I was a high school counselor myself. I worked at high schools in Washington, D.C. and Georgia. And I went to Emory University for my undergraduate degree in business. And then I did my master's in school counseling at the University of Maryland. So we're just really happy to be with you all today, and want to just thank Yukiko and Education USA Japan for hosting us. We've got a lot to cover, but our real goal is to give you information and then get to your questions at the end. We'll do a quick overview of both the University of Richmond and Common App. Then we'll talk about the student experience of inviting recommenders, as well as then transitioning over to what it's like for teachers and counselors to complete recommendations and forms within Common App. And then you'll really get to hear from Amanda about how institutions are looking at the documents that you are sending on behalf of your students. We'll wrap that up with the tools that you can use during this process, both you and your students, and then again, leave time for questions. As we are talking, if there are things that pop up, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A so that we can go ahead and answer those at the end.
Wonderful. So I'm happy to be giving kind of a brief overview of the University of Richmond, which is the institution that I represent in the United States. The University of Richmond is a small liberal arts and sciences university located in Richmond, Virginia. Virginia is centrally located on the east coast of the United States, and Richmond is Virginia's capital city. So we are located just about 2 hours south of Washington, D.C., which allows our students some great major metropolitan access. While we're located in the capital city, which provides our students a lot of great culture and opportunity, we are not an urban campus. So our campus is located just about a 15 minutes drive outside of downtown in a suburban community in Richmond, very green, very safe for our students. We are a bit larger for a liberal arts and sciences university, but we're still able to maintain a very small and personalized classroom experience for our students. 99% of our classes hold fewer than 30 students, and our average class size is only 16. We have a highly residential community, as we are undergraduate focused, with 90% of our students living on campus all 4 years. I also want to make note of our demonstrated need. All international students are eligible for both merit-based scholarships as well as need-based scholarships, and we're among a small percentage of U.S. institutions that does meet 100% of demonstrated need for all students. In the case of international students, these are going to be financial aid packages that include no loans, so they are grants and scholarships only. Next slide, please. As far as the class that we enroll every year, we do hope to enroll a class size of just over 800 students. And you can see here that our students really come from all over the world. I have the opportunity as an admissions representative to work with all of our students from East and Southeast Asia, Oceania, and Canada. And I work on an international team of 3, and we have the pleasure of traveling all over the world in a traditional year in order to connect with our students. So our students last year represented 8% of international students, but this year we are going to be welcoming a class of about 10% international students. So a really highly global campus community where our students are able to make Richmond home. And I have just one last slide where I want to highlight some of our statistics and our rankings. So we are ranked as number 23 National Liberal Arts College in the United States. So we are a selective institution. And we really pride ourselves in our hands-on experiential learning opportunities for our students. Namely, we are number 2 for Best Career Services. 96% of our students are graduating and moving right into a career or they're furthering their education. So they have excellent support to begin their careers and build their resumes as students on our campus. We're also a top sender for students studying abroad. So while we'll bring about 10% of our students from international destinations, we'll send a huge number of our domestic students abroad every year to really combine those skills and make sure that we have strong cross-cultural collaboration among our students. One of the ways that we facilitate these internship and research opportunities for our students is through what we call the Richmond Guarantee. The Richmond Guarantee is a promise that every single student will receive up to $4,000 US to support a summer research or internship opportunity on our campus. So of course, we want to put students in front of the employers, in front of the opportunities that are really going to be meaningful for them. We want a student to say yes to every great opportunity that comes their way. So that $4,000 can support housing and living expenses if a student needs to travel for that summer engagement opportunity. We have students that will put this funding into entrepreneurial endeavors. This past summer, we had an international student home in Ireland for the summer, and he used his Richmond Guarantee to create a new coffee shop in his hometown. So the students' possibilities are really endless for how they can use this funding. So that's a brief overview of the University of Richmond. I'm happy to provide my contact information if you do have any Richmond-specific questions.
Great. Okay, and now I'm going to introduce you to the larger Common App membership, which includes the University of Richmond. Also, I'm sure some of you have probably joined me in the past, so some of these may look familiar with just some updated numbers, but I think it's always important to start with where Common App began. We are a nonprofit membership organization with a commitment to access, equity, and integrity in the college admission process. We have been around since 1975, but you can see that it has grown over time. So our membership began with 15 schools in 1975 and has now grown to a membership of over 922 institutions. The image that you're seeing here is the map that we traditionally mail out each fall. This year, it's unclear given the current global pandemic and so many schools going virtual that not even sure if we'll be mailing a map this year, but we are still working on an updated map. And I always just think it's helpful to get a sense of where schools are located geographically. We do have a member institution in all 50 of the United States, plus the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. We also have international institutions. So for students who are looking to study in a country other than the US, they can also find opportunities within the Common App membership. Those 62 international members are in 18 countries outside of the US, including 2 that are in Japan. Thinking about the graph and the growth in Common App membership, that means that each year we welcome new institutions that will then be accepting the Common App for their admissions application. And so this year, when we launched the application on August 1st, we welcomed 42 colleges to Common App membership. Those institutions are in 20 different US states, and about 50% of them are public institutions in the US. The institutions on the right are just the listings of the public institutions, but for the full list of new members, you can always go to our blog at commonapp.org/blog. This gives you a sense of who is using the Common App each year. So each year we support over 1 million students or applicants. That means that at least those students have submitted at least one application using the Common App. Last year, those 1 million students submitted 5.6 million applications. And they're predominantly coming from the US, 91%, but then we have 9% of students who are applying from countries outside of the US and from 213 countries outside of the US. On the left here, you can see the top 10 countries, which is led by China, India, and Canada. And then you can see down there that Japan, we do get applications from Japan. They're ranked around 22 overall of all countries. This is where you can kind of get a sense of the activity that we see coming out of Japan. This was this current or last year, so 2019-2020. We saw just under 600 students in Japan submit 3,500 applications. On the left, you'll see the top 15 institutions, which hasn't varied much over the last year. But I also think it's just very important to recognize that those 576 students apply to nearly 400 different Common App member schools. So they are looking for their right fit and for the colleges that work for them, and they're not all applying to those 15 institutions that you see there on the left. Also just wanted to say that this year has been challenging on many fronts, and there have certainly been statements out there and concerns among international students, and we wanted to just go out there and say that Common App really does stand by any international student who is looking to study in the United States. These are some messages from our social media, but we do follow along with messages that go out, and we want to be as supportive as possible, as I am sure my colleague Amanda would also agree. With that, I want to transition into the student experience using the Common Application. Everything starts from our website, commonapp.org. Before you even jump into the application, it's just good to know how to navigate some of the tools that are on the website. So the first place you can go is to the Explore Colleges place, and that's where you can actually look to see which colleges accept the Common App. In addition, on this page, you'll be able to find filters that you can use if you or your students want to narrow down to find particular schools. So if a student is looking for a school in a particular region or a certain size institution, we also have on there filters for offering aid for international students, information about testing. So I think here, yes, and we're going to talk later on about applying test optional, but we know that many students have not been able to take an SAT or ACT this year, and colleges have responded to that. And you will be able to find which schools within the Common App membership are test optional. You can also visit fairtest.org if you want to see a full list of colleges, especially with their international student requirements, which could be different than US domestic students. Also note on the Common App website, there is a global search that you can always use if you are looking for particular text anywhere on the website. You can also on our website get information about each individual member. So this is the quick snapshot example for the University of Richmond. This is information that Richmond gives to us that we then share with you. Each school has one of these profile pages. There's also a virtual tour of campuses that you can get to from the Common App website, image galleries. And this, again, important since students can't visit all the schools that they would like to. This gives them an opportunity to do those virtual visits. Schools can also highlight their academic programs. And again, all of this text is searchable. So if there's a particular major that a student is looking for, or study area, or a particular student experience, they can learn more and search for that on our website. When it's time to actually create a Common App account, students will go to, again, commonapp.org and click Apply Now or Create an Account. And the one thing I want to remind everyone is, while the application is geared for students, you are certainly welcome to create what we call a practice account. So if you want to be able to see the student experience, you would just click on the Education Professional, and that will basically allow for you to have an application that's just a practice that colleges are not seeing as an actual student for submission. It's just a great way to really understand how the application works and what it looks like. We have now had account rollover as a feature for the past several years. And the idea behind this is that students can create their account at any time, and their information in their application will roll over from year to year. So officially, Common App launches each year on August 1st. But again, if students get in there before August 1st, they can start to explore as well as fill out certain information, specifically anything that's on the Common App tab, which is anything that's not college specific. So their username remains the same, their password remains the same. Information on the Common App tab carries over. What does not carry over is anything on the My Colleges tab. So anything that's college specific or having to do with recommender invitations. All of that should happen after August 1st. This is what it looks like from within the application. I think, again, most of you have seen this. On the College Search tab, just want to put a reminder that the application requirements grid is available on the College Search tab. This is where you can pull up all Common App members, and you can look up an individual school to see what their deadlines are, their writing requirements, their recommendation requirements, any details that they have, their English language proficiency test requirements. All of that is in the requirements grid, and that is also a downloadable PDF. Given the current global pandemic with COVID-19, we got together soon after the beginning of the year to discuss how we could create space within the application to give students an opportunity to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on them. We worked with our application advisory committee of member institutions, as well as our counselor advisory committee, also known as our outreach advisory. And we came up with a question that is currently live within the application. It lives in the additional information section, which is separate from the existing additional information question. It is a 250 word limit question. It is optional, so it is not essay length. And it says, community disruptions such as COVID-19 and natural disasters can have deep and long-lasting impacts. If you need it, this space is yours to describe those impacts. Colleges care about the effects on your health and well-being, safety, family, circumstances, future plans, and education, including access to reliable technology and quiet study spaces. We also then link out to an FAQ with that question. In a little bit, Amanda will actually talk more about what she sees from the university side about how students, as well as counselors, when we show the counselor question, will be able to use these questions. So now shifting over to the My Colleges tab, this is where students are completing the questions that are specific to each college on their list. And they're also here inviting their recommenders. So in here is where they're going to invite their counselor, invite their teachers, and as well as other recommenders. Within our system, there are 4 different recommender types. So the counselor is the person who has access to the student's academic records. We do understand that not all schools have someone in a role that is called a counselor, but it is the person who can best talk about the school as well as the overall academics of the student and has access to their academic record or transcript. Some schools, though not all of our member institutions, require a counselor letter of recommendation. Then there's the teacher recommendation. Again, not all schools require that. Around 42% of our members do. Thirdly, we have an other recommender, which is optional. In some schools, each school, again, decides what they either require or allow. But these are generally individuals who are outside of the school who are writing a letter of support on behalf of their student. And then the 4th type is the advisor invitation. And this is not even though it's called a recommender, it's not someone who's actually submitting forms on behalf of a student, but it's more so someone who's assisting the student through the recommender process or application process. So students can invite up to 3 advisors, and when they do that invitation, it just gives the advisor access to see the student's in-progress application. Again, that was high level for the application itself, but I want to kind of shift now to what it looks like for you all on the recommender side. When the student puts in your name and information in their application, it triggers an email to get sent to you that allows you to connect your account to their account. If you've never had a Common App account, that would allow you to activate your recommender account. Otherwise, if you already have an account, then it just gives you that permission to include that student in your list of students. You do have 3 options when a student invites you. So one, they can invite you and you could say, yes, and I'm going to use the Common App online recommender system. Your second option is to say, yes, you're going to do the recommendation for the student, but you want to use paper forms, and so you opt out of the online recommender system. And then the third option you have is if you do not feel that you can write a supportive letter for a student, you can always decline a request. The official link for the recommender system is recommend.commonapp.org. If you haven't gotten any invitations yet this year, but you have been in the system in the past, you will notice that there has been a significant refresh of the system. For the past several months, we have been trying to let people know that this refresh was coming. This was really a follow-up to the refresh that we did to the application system last year. And so our project drivers were the same as we had for the application, which were to modernize the platform, to make it more accessible, particularly thinking about individuals who may be using assistive technology like screen readers, to make it more responsive, meaning more mobile responsive. So giving it, allowing for it to alter the sizing based on the type of device someone might be using. So you will find if you access your Common App recommender account on a mobile device, it will be easier to use, whereas in the past it was not mobile friendly. And then fourth, to infuse the Common App branding, because we did rebrand last year, moving from those maroon colors into these new blues and greens. So lots to see. I'm going to walk you through just a few highlights of the new system, but if you want to just learn more, these links here, commonapp.org/blog, really talk about the updates to the system. And there's a specific FAQ on our Recommender Solution Center that also talks about many of the new features. One thing you'll notice, again, that first time you get in there, because everything may look new, is that there is a system walkthrough. And so it will walk you through what you're seeing with some of the new icons. It will show you where you're going to see your students listed. It's going to talk about where you are along the way with your form submissions. You're also going to find many more filters that didn't exist in the past. So you can now look for students based on deadlines, certain form requirements. If you want to find students that are applying to certain colleges, you can find that using the filters. So many more filters to use. There's also a to-do list for you, teachers and counselors, so you'll know what's coming up, and you can look at what's due this week versus next week versus overall for the whole year. So we hope that this will help you with managing your list of requirements and to-dos. And again, in the walkthrough, I showed you that there's just more information to help you with what's actually required from you. Just some other enhancements that we added into the system. One is you'll see that the student's birthday is now listed, as well as their Common App ID. So if you ever need to contact support, you'll have their Common App ID readily accessible right there. You also will start to see some notifications when a student maybe has added you for a new college, or they've added a new college, or there's a new form, like an early decision agreement form. There are question icons that you can click on for more information. And then there's also, whether you're in there as a counselor or if you're in there as an advisor, you have the ability to preview the student's application. And so you'll see that there under that preview. In this slide here, just to show you, students have to either turn on or turn off application preview. So here in the example, it's not turned on by the student, but in this one, they have turned that on. Just like on the student side, there is also a question for counselors, a COVID-19 question on the counselor side. And don't know if I want to read this verbatim for you, but want to just say that it's located in the school details section within the profile section. This is, you're given more space to discuss the impact on your school and community. So you have a 500-word limit. Again, it is optional. We do say if you have a school profile and you already have this information on your uploaded school profile, you do not need to answer this question, but we're hoping it gives space for schools to be able to tell colleges about any changes that may have happened at your school, whether it's grading scales, policies, course changes, if the schedule changed, testing, anything that you think that has impacted your entire student body that you want to let colleges know about, this question is there for you. I'm going to hand this to you, Amanda, if you want to talk about how you see students and counselors using these two COVID questions.
Sure. I would definitely just like to reiterate and support all of the claims and guidance that Meredith has provided. I know from an admissions perspective, we are very grateful to have this COVID-19 question, particularly for our student applicants. We are trying, at least for Richmond, to avoid 12,000 essays about COVID-19 and the impacts. So to have this optional space for students and school officials is highly, highly appreciated. And I want to, well, Meredith provided a great overview of what we can expect from counselors. I do want to share what the expectation is from students. So these are the types of things that we'd really like to hear from the student and using that space. Of course, 250 words is not a lot of space. Students should not at all feel that they need to put something there if they have not experienced a personal impact. But we would like for what the student to share is to be just that, a personal impact, something that has affected them directly. Certainly things like disruptions to internships or activities that they had planned on completing at the end of their junior year, this summer. These are things that we would love to know more about, but we would like to have anything that affected the school community or the class as a whole be shared by that counselor or that school official. So everything that Meredith mentioned and also that's listed here, we would love to hear direct from the school official. So now diving into how recommendations can support your students. And I should really start by just saying that they absolutely support your students in a big way, and that many colleges and universities are highly reliant on the content that counselors and teachers are able to provide. So Meredith had shown a slide earlier about who counselors and teachers are, but I really want to dive in a little bit deeper in this next slide to what the expectations are in terms of content from counselors or from teachers. So of course, the counselor, as Meredith mentioned, is someone who can provide that additional content about the school community as a whole and can provide that transcript and the school profile. So this is a person that will be completing the school report document and may or may not be sending a letter of recommendation. So it was noted before that not all colleges and universities require a counselor letter of recommendation. At the case with University of Richmond, we require one letter of recommendation, and it can come from any school representative, so it doesn't have to be a counselor. Jumping ahead, I did see the question in the Q&A, which is about schools that do not require counselor or teacher letters of recommendation. I will say that we're not great at consolidating all of this information, and so it sometimes does take time to look at each individual university's website to gain this information. I expect that the Common Application also does have those requirements, yes or no, but there may not be a complete list that students can look at when they're trying to evaluate who they need to send these documents to. There will also be colleges and universities that will request these documents as optional materials. And then there will be some schools and universities that say, if you send it to us, we will not read it. So keeping in mind that colleges and universities evaluate students and pay mind to these letters of recommendations at varying levels. So in the counselor recommendation, we do hope that they can give us kind of a broader idea of who the student is in the school community as a whole. I've seen many college counselors that will take the time to request a self-evaluation from the student to get an idea of what the student sees as being their strengths, their greatest achievements, and using them to kind of guide that counselor letter, or perhaps connecting with different teachers that the student has interacted with to shape that information. The teacher letters of recommendation are definitely a bit more focused in representing that specific classroom experience. So these are, of course, teachers that have taught the student. Preferably, these are teachers that have taught the student recently, perhaps in the junior year, at the beginning of senior year, that can bring that more recent perspective of who the student has grown to become in their later high school years. The teachers, we hope that they kind of speak about the students' mastery and participation in the classroom beyond just what grade they got. Of course, we're able to see a transcript itself, and so we want to gain something beyond that letter grade in that letter of recommendation. I want to also note that this does not necessarily have to be a teacher that represents a major or a class that is relevant to the student's intended major. This may be helpful, and again, this is where universities and colleges can differ through the process. So if this is a student that is applying directly into an engineering program at a Tier 1 research institution, perhaps they do want to have a letter of recommendation from a math teacher or a physics teacher, someone that can speak about that particular technical mastery. However, at a liberal arts and sciences college or at an institution where a student may be completing or entering as an undeclared major, it is not particularly important that we see a letter of recommendation from a particular teacher in a particular subject area. And this also doesn't have to be a teacher from the class that the student performed the best in. We're always happy to hear how the student can grow and face challenges as well. So that's a little bit about the differentiation between these two types of teacher recommendations. But what can written evaluations do beyond that? So written evaluations, for those schools that do require them, are really helping us to dig deeper into this concept of fit. Will the student have a strong transition to our college or university environment? Will they fit in with their peers? Will they be a leader among their peers? Will they be successful, not just academically, but socially and extracurricularly as well? So we want to get a sense of what the student is going to be able to bring to our whole campus community. I think it's also important to note that we want these letters of recommendation to support and go beyond what we read in the application from the student. So we know these students, 18-year-olds, sometimes they have trouble bragging about themselves in their applications. And so we hope that counselors and teacher letters of recommendation can do a little bit of bragging for them. As far as some tips in the admission process, I want to speak about tips regarding the mechanics of writing a letter of recommendation. We get a lot of questions about length of letters. It is certainly our preference that these letters are no longer than 1 page. As admission professionals, we read a lot of content and material, and so it is our hope that these letters can be 1 page or less when possible. We know that sometimes you will have your favorite students and you just cannot restrict yourself to 1 page. We will read that second page if it is there, but we would love to condense that to 1 page when possible. Keeping in mind that when you do submit letters of recommendation through Common Application, that we ask that you don't specify the college or university in your letter, because many of us are going to receive that. And it can always be kind of a disappointment when we do read some other university's name there. We don't hold it against the student, but we don't love to see it. I would say the one exception to this is if you yourself as a recommender attended that college or university. So if this is a school that is your alma mater, you may consider declining sending that letter of recommendation through the Common Application itself and sending it either through mail or by email to that university, explaining that you yourself are an alumnus, because that can really bring some added support to your letter, that you know truly what kind of student can be successful at that school. As Meredith said, don't feel shy in declining an invitation to submit a letter if you cannot speak on them fully, or if you don't have the time to do that, and giving that student another opportunity to find a different recommender. And also feel free to share any updates with us. So we do unfortunately know that sometimes things happen. Students change their commitment to a class. There can be conduct issues. And so while it is rare, we as admission professionals do occasionally receive an update that a recommender needs to change their recommendation or needs to even rescind their letter of recommendation, which does happen. And finally, I want to stress that we do welcome bullet points in letters of recommendation. This is becoming much more popular. It really draws our eye to certain parts of the letter of recommendation and can really drive home particular ideas that you want to make sure we understand about that student. I show an image here of the rating section. This is something that accompanies the school report or the letters of recommendation from teachers. I will say that this is becoming a less popular section to fill out, at least from an admissions perspective. We're seeing fewer and fewer school officials and teachers fill out this particular section. So if this is not a section you feel that you can fill out, or if you have school policies that don't allow you to fill out some sort of grading system or rating system like this, that is perfectly acceptable as well. So furthering the tips on writing a letter of recommendation in this next slide, I want to talk now more about the content. So personalizing these letters of recommendation is very much appreciated. So hearing anecdotes rather than lists of achievements and lists of adjectives. As I mentioned before, these letters of recommendation are trying to give us a sense of fit. They're trying to get a sense of who the student will be in our classroom, in our community, what they will achieve, and how they will grow. And so if you can paint a personal picture of your familiarity with the student, that really resonates with us as admission professionals. We always like to know how you know the student, how long you've known the student in your letter of recommendation, to again bring that additional context of again, your relationship with them and how well you can speak about the person that they are. These letters should support what a student has written about in their essays and in their activities section. And if they can, they should dive into a little bit more detail. So we know that students can be restricted, particularly in that activities section, of what they're able to include about that achievement. And so if you can provide support and further elaboration on that activity, we would love to hear that. As you're writing, we are really trying to gather a sense of those non-cognitive variables, things that can't be measured through their transcript, through their GPA, through their test scores as we're doing evaluation. So highlighting the student's leadership, academic achievement, growth, engagement, resilience, and character are the key features that we really hope to gather through that letter of recommendation. And I do want to address some frequently asked questions that we get very, very often in the admissions process. Does it hurt if my student if I don't write a letter of recommendation? The quick answer is absolutely not. We don't know that you've declined to write a letter of recommendation, so it doesn't penalize the student in any way. On the school report that the counselor school official completes, there is an opportunity to give the student a general ranking or recommendation, whether that's you enthusiastically recommend, strongly recommend, with reservation. if you do fill out that section, that is an area that we do pay attention to. So a student that is recommended with hesitation would definitely give us pause and concern, and we would be reading that letter of recommendation very closely, or perhaps even following up with you as their counselor. How important are letters of recommendation? This does vary from institution to institution. At the University of Richmond, we focus primarily on the students' academic achievement and what it is that they've chosen to share with us, because they are the student that we are reviewing and admitting to our institution. But letters of recommendation, as I mentioned, are there to support that claim and further that claim for the student. And so in that way, they are very important. Many colleges and institutions are pretty comfortable kind of ranking the materials that are required and their level of importance. So that's something worth looking at each individual institution. Can I write my letter in a language other than English? Absolutely you can. We of course would need an official translation at that point, but we do see that, at least at the University of Richmond, that's fine. Again, something to perhaps ask at a different individual institutional level, but it is accepted. And then who should submit the counselor forms if I don't have a counselor? So Meredith kind of pointed this out earlier. Not every school has a representative in this capacity. A school official, a head or homeroom teacher for the student, a principal, a vice principal, these are all representatives that could submit the forms on behalf of the counselor. So moving right along into some of the additional supplemental materials that admissions representatives will evaluate. The school profile is the document submitted by the school official or counselor with the school report. And these are some of the key items that we're really looking for. So the school motto or mission, we want to know what the student has been studying under, what that mission statement has been, because that can give us a good sense if the student is aligned with our mission statement as a university. We'd love your contact information so we can follow up with you. The student demographic breakdown. If you have students that are from Japan or from elsewhere in the world, we'd love to see that. And then the matriculations by country or school. So here's an example of giving us a sense of where students turn to across the world for their education. If you can provide us even with a list of the schools that they're accepted into or attend, that is again helpful in giving us a sense of whether or not our institution may be similar and therefore a good fit for your students. The other piece on the school profile that's helpful is the academic information. So looking at the GPA calculation or distribution, particularly if your school's not on a 4.0 scale, how do you grade your students? What types of classes are offered? And then any type of testing or distribution information. We never want to penalize a student for not taking 12 AP classes. We see often that students are told they can only take 2 AP classes every year. And so bringing that context of what's available and what a student can take helps us contextualize and make an evaluation that is truly specific to that student at that school, rather than comparing that student to applicants from other high schools across the country or across the world. For GPA and recalculation, so the GPA, of course, is an important measure, seeing that the student is academically prepared to be successful. And at the University of Richmond, we do recalculate GPAs. So this is our average admitted student profile. We recalculate it on an unweighted 4.0 scale. This is our middle 50%. And we use the core subjects in order to recalculate. So of course, internationally, distribution can look a little bit different, with students perhaps taking many more science classes than we would typically see in the US, or many more language classes than we would see. But we are going to count all of the core subjects regardless of how many there are. We take their grades within those individual classes to recalculate. For pass-fail evaluation, at least at the University of Richmond, we will be calculating fail grades into a student's recalculated GPA, but we will not be considering pass grades. So we'll not be assigning a pass grade to a particular letter or numeric grade. I will say that the recalculation process highly varies from institution to institution. Because at Richmond, we have a holistic selective review, and we have a sizable staff, we are able to recalculate GPAs, but that may not be the case at other larger institutions. And so that's why, while again, the school profile and having that GPA distribution and contextual information can be really important. As far as submitting the test reports, there are a number of different ways to do this. Most institutions have no preference between the ACT or the SAT. These scores can all be submitted electronically through the testing agency. If they are submitted through the testing agency, they are considered official test scores. But there are opportunities to self-report scores. And again, different universities have different requirements on whether they accept self-reported test scores. At the University of Richmond, students, in order to self-report their scores, need to submit this additional form. Many colleges and universities have this type of a form where they're actually submitting a PDF of their score results, which still allows them to submit those scores at no cost, but consider them official. At Richmond, we do not consider the scores that a student puts on their Common Application to be official results. However, some institutions do. So students should be mindful that if they are putting their scores on the application itself, they should of course be accurate and truthful, and that they may meet the requirements to submit official scores to that institution. And finally, we do superscore in most cases. Again, looking at each university's policies differently, but at Richmond, we superscore both the SAT as well as the ACT scores. And as Meredith mentioned, we have seen a lot of changes with COVID-19, and many schools in the US have moved to test optional. When a student should apply test optional is a highly personal decision. So a student should ask themselves, first, of course, if they had access to a test, did they feel confident leaving that test? Did they have a good night's sleep the night before? If they felt good about their tests and their results, they're certainly welcome to submit them. It also might be helpful to look at the average testing profile for that institution when making that decision. But again, it is up to a student, and a student should not feel that they have to justify their decision. So they don't have to tell us why or why not they did or did not submit test scores. Students will have to opt in to their test optional review. So even if they've taken an SAT and have it automatically sent to an institution, they will still have to on the application itself or through a form for the school, tell us if they do or do not want those scores considered. At Richmond, test scores are not required for scholarship review, but again, this will vary from school to school. So a lot of content there about the optional documents that we're reviewing. I'm going to turn it back over to Meredith to talk about some of the tools you can use on the Common Application to support your students through the application process.
All right. So just to make sure that you know what's out there, one is we have our Common App Ready suite of counselor and advisor tools. If you are looking for handouts or PDFs that you can hand or provide to students and families, you can go to Common App Ready to get again, these handouts. They're all different parts of the application process. There are ones that are specific for international applicants. There's also this example application dictionary, which can help with some of the terminology that's used in the admission process, especially knowing that a lot of it can be or feel very US-centric, and there are acronyms that many people are not familiar with. So our application dictionary is a place you can point students to. We also have out here something called brag sheets, which I know that Amanda talked a little bit about, the students giving their recommenders information about themselves. You can actually, the students can fill out these brag sheets or questionnaires for their counselor and teachers to help you get to know them better outside of the classroom, and they can give those to you. The website also has roadmaps for students. So when you're thinking about grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, what students should be doing, they can follow along these roadmaps. There are also guides out on this plan part of the website to the application and to the recommendation process, as well as information about paying for college and parent resources. I'm not sure if this is finally, but I think it's pretty close to finally. We are available 24/7 for support, knowing that we're supporting students and counselors and teachers and families all over the world. We are available regardless of what time zone you are in. So if you do have a question or your students have questions, they can always contact our Solution Center, whether they just want to go and visit the Solution Centers here, that app support and rec support sites, or if they want to send us an email, we will get back to them regardless, again, of time. I do want to highlight specifically on the app support Student Solution Center, 2 resources. One is there's a live colleges resource that you'll see here, which tells you schools that are members of Common App but may not have yet turned on their college-specific questions yet, because we're so close still to August 1st. There are some schools that are still finalizing their part of the application, and those will be available when they're ready, which could be, let's say, September 1st, for example. So the Live Colleges resource here will give you that information. There's also a resource here called the Writing Requirements, where you can look up any college and learn not just whether they require the Common App essay, but also if they have any additional writing supplements and what those writing supplement questions are. So you can look at that in advance prior to a student adding that college to their Common App list. Just again, this is tips and best practices. So if you don't have a practice account, a student account, that's just a great way to learn the system. We have video tutorials out there. Our website has a ton of resources. If you don't get our blog, you can register to receive it by going to that link at the bottom. I said blog, but I meant the newsletter. But either way, the blog gets fed into the newsletter, which is, if you go to commonapp.org/counselors and recommenders, you can get to the blog and newsletter. We also have resources within the system. We are on social media where we'll post updates, and you can contact us anytime with your questions. At this point, we do want to open it up for questions that may have come in.
Thank you so much for the really informative presentation. I think it was very helpful. We have 2 questions. The first one is, how much background information of the high school is necessary in the recommendation letter? Could you answer this question?
Sure. So the question about what amount of content or information regarding the school should be included in the letter of recommendation. This is going to likely depend on whether or not a school profile is being submitted for that student. So most high schools, from what I understand, will have the opportunity to submit that school profile, which will have all of the content that I was kind of speaking through earlier. So information about the classes that are offered, information about the rigor or ranking of that high school, the school's mission statement. If a school profile is being provided, then the letter of recommendation does not have to provide that content again. So we will be able to just reference the school profile. If a school profile is not being included or is perhaps not particularly robust, the letter of recommendation is welcome to include some additional context to help us better understand the school environment.
Thank you. Everyone, please click on the Q&A if you have questions and type your questions in English. Let's read the second question. My school is a top academic high school in the region, and the level of the classes and the tests is so high and challenging for students. The students are all hardworking. However, the Board of Education didn't allow teachers to provide weighted GPA when one of my students applied for universities in the US. Actually, I wrote how well he was in the recommendation letter, but is there other way to appeal my students' high academic results without weighted GPA?
Thank you for that question. So I think that you had an excellent thought and idea to try to include that information in the letter of recommendation. I know an admissions representatives would be very happy to know that context when a weighted GPA is not available. So I think continuing with that method is definitely advisable. Again, another helpful tool could be the school profile. So even when a weighted GPA is not available, if the school is able to provide a grade distribution, a GPA distribution for unweighted grades within the school, that will also give us a sense that perhaps that student is rated and graded within the top 5% of their school community. So that school profile GPA distribution can also really support that claim. But again, I think that letters of recommendation are going to be really carefully reviewed in most cases. And so to have that written out in the counselor or letter of recommendation from a teacher is very helpful.
Okay, let's go to the third question. Thank you very much for your presentation. Amanda mentioned that the letter of recommendation should be no longer than 1 page. Can I understand that policy applies to other universities as well?
Sure. Unfortunately, I would say that there's no consistent rule or consensus among colleges and universities in the US. Again, as admission officers, reading applications, we are reviewing a lot of content. And so in connecting with my peers that represent many different types of schools and universities, I would say that our hope is that schools or teachers are able to condense their letter down to just 1 page, but that is not universally felt. So again, where I said colleges and universities in the US are not necessarily all on the same page in making consistent rules. So it may be helpful for that student to reach out to the specific admissions representatives from their colleges and universities to see if those schools have more hard, fast rules that they follow. But again, anecdotally, speaking with representatives from other schools, I think we're very consistently appreciate letters of recommendation that are less than a page.
Okay, we have another question. If a school does not give an academic ranking in student academic works, do you accept it?
Yeah, so I'll take that one just in because that question has come up before about ranking. So within the Common App, both the student and the counselor are allowed to discuss rank. And on the student side, it's not a required question. On the counselor side, if there is no ranking among students, the counselor has the ability to just say that there is no ranking. And then I would say, Amanda, you can chime in there if a school says that students are not ranked.
Sure, we as on the admission side are seeing it become less and less common that students have an academic ranking within their graduating class. So we do not penalize students if they don't have a ranking. If it's there, we will use it to provide that context. But I would say more and more applicants are applying without rankings.
When a student has graduated from the high school or is in their gap year right now, who will be writing their recommendation?
So we would still, in most cases, like to see a school official who's written a letter of recommendation on behalf of that student. If a student anticipates taking a gap year, it may be wise for that student to still ask for a teacher or a counselor recommendation in their final graduating year that then they can hold on to, that the counselor can have available to submit in that following year when the student is in a gap year. But in most cases, a college or university will still need some school official to be able to speak on that student's academic experience, and again, submit the transcript and the school report and the other academic materials. What we do see is common from students completing a gap year is that they use one of those additional recommender types. So if they completed a gap year completing an internship, their employer may submit a letter of recommendation on their behalf to give us some context about what that student has been doing for the past year, but we will still need a school official in addition to that.
I did just want to jump in because there was a question earlier in the presentation about finding the schools that and their number of requirements for letters of recommendation. And so there are a few places that students and counselors and teachers can find that. One is on that Explore page of the Common App website, there is a filter about letters of recommendation. There's also within the application a filter for students where they can select if they're looking for schools that don't require letters of recommendation. And then that the application requirements grid, which is on that college search tab, that is available both in the application as well as in the recommender system. And it is, again, you can print out the full list, or you can also, within the systems, you can sort by, if you were looking for particular institutions having certain numbers of letter of recommendation requirements.
Thank you. We still have time for questions, so please feel free to type in any questions you may have. While we are waiting, I'd like to ask questions. In the past, I had an advisee who want to have a letter of recommendation from teachers, but teacher declines that request because their school didn't allow to submit online letter of recommendations. But later, the situation has been changed. So the teacher wanted to write a letter of recommendation online within the Common Application, but since he has declined the request from the student, he had trouble getting back to the Common Application to submit a letter online. In that case, what should what can teacher do for students?
The best thing to do is to contact our Solution Center, our support team, because together between the student and the teacher, they can explain the situation, and then our support team can actually undo that the decline so that the student can re-invite the teacher and this teacher can accept it so that they can use the online system.
Thank you. Okay. Since we don't have questions, we are going to close it now. So if you think of any last minute question, please submit it online. While waiting, we'd like to promote our EducationUSA week. During the EducationUSA week until this Friday, EducationUSA will have a series of study abroad events and also provide individual advising through the virtual office hours. So if you'd like to talk to Education News advisors after this webinar, please drop by our virtual office hours. The link is available on the Education USA website. Okay, since I think we answered all the questions, so I'd like to close the webinar.